Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Father-Son Packers podcast, your source for Packers news, notes, and analysis. My name is Tommy, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, my dad, Matt. Apologies in advance because I am a little bit under the weather, so if the sound is not as good as usual, that's on me. But, Dad, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. And, I was just thinking after our earlier discussion, I'm hoping this game does not prompt me to bring out the elder swear.
Yes. Harry Potter Puppet Pals. That's the age of the internet. I mean, that probably went out on YouTube, almost 20 years ago now? Maybe not quite as long as ago.
Not quite that
but,
long, no.
Yeah, those old YouTube videos mostly hold up, although not Annoying Orange. But anyway, we are here today to preview the Packers playoff wildcard matchup against the Philadelphia Eagles. Packers 7 seed going to Philadelphia 2 seed. Going to be a really good game. Going to be a really tough game for Green Bay. Philadelphia is a very good team. We're going to be giving you all the details, though. What, looks like it's going in favor for the Packers in this game, what you should be nervous about as a Packers fan, looking at how Green Bay can approach this game, what we hope Green Bay does in terms of strategy and approach to this game, who are going to be the key performers in this game, everything that you need to know for this one. Before we get into any of that, though, just wanted to pitch a couple of things. If you like what you hear here, follow us on either Twitter or Blue Sky. We are at Father-Son Packer. Once again, that's at Father-Son Packer. We tweet out, whenever there are injury reports, roster moves, other Packers-related news, whenever we put out new episodes, content from other Packers content creators. Pretty much just everything Green Bay Packers. Go ahead and give us a follow there at Father-Son Packer. It would really help us out. And then subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. Leave a review, leave a rating. We would really appreciate it, whether that's, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you consume podcasts. We are there. So check us out. Leave a review, leave a comment, tell a friend. We would really appreciate it. But, Dad, also before we get into this, just one little piece of news, Green Bay related. Xavier McKinney voted first team All-Pro today by the Associated Press, so that's really awesome. I think it's the first, I cannot remember who tweeted it, but it's the first safety All-Pro that they have had since the year 2000. So wow. It has been a long time since they've had an All-Pro safety.
That's some good safety since then.
Definitely a home run signing by the Packers in free agency. No two ways about it. Fantastic signing.
Number 3 all time.
Oh goodness.
Free agent signing?
I think you're putting me on the spot because obviously it's Reggie and Wood are 1 and 2. And that's tough. I think, you got to put Zadarius Smith in there. Had, a few fantastic years with Green Bay, especially that first year with Green Bay. Going down the list. Goodness. You're putting me on the spot in some of the older ones. I'm not remembering who was a free agent signing. Favre was a trade. That's not going to count. They didn't do
that many for a while.
That's true. I'd have to think about that, but
it is only 1 year so far. But
unless you want to put Jacobs 3, but anyway, so excited for him, and I think also I read somewhere that Zach Tom was 3rd. There unfortunately are not
right
3
tackle voting.
Yeah. So if there were 3 teams, he would be. I feel like there should be 3 teams. There are 3 teams in the NBA. I don't know why there aren't 3 teams in the NFL, but whatever. He was close to getting
too much
there.
Work. We don't want to count that. We don't put a 3rd row on our spreadsheet. That's too much work.
And it's like, especially when it's like, okay, like only 10 total linemen get in, only 2 total tight ends. Like there are more than 2 tight ends deserving. Like the fact that Trey McBride doesn't get acknowledged for the season that he has, the fact that Zach Tom didn't get acknowledged for the season that he has had. We're putting 6 receivers on there, and 10 linemen. Like that feels a little. So
I guess
odd.
Tight ends were Bowers and Kittle.
Yeah, Bowers and Kittle 1 and 2, which makes sense. But anyway, that is all of the news related items that we have going into this game. So let's start talking about this one, Dad, because I'm feeling okay about it. How are you feeling about this upcoming matchup? Because the Eagles are really good, and it kind of is a nice little full circle moment that the Packers' first playoff game of the year is the same as their first regular season game of the year. And yeah, how are you feeling about it?
I'm hoping that this is not going to be bookends.
Yeah, me too. Me as well. I'm hoping this is not, because I did almost catch myself. I was like, kind of fitting their first, and then I'm hoping this isn't their last game of the season. No, but it's going to be a tough game.
It is. That's the thing. I feel like they can win. The Packers can win, but they're not favored. And the Eagles are a good team.
Eagles are a very good team. They, their defense is elite. We'll talk a little bit about it shortly. Their offense has a crazy amount of weapons. I was kind of looking back to our first preview of this game from week 1. I was reading through it and I was like, oh, that's right. Like you sometimes you forget just the plethora of ridiculous players that are on this Eagles offense specifically. I was like remembering back, it's like, yeah, they have like top 10 paid players at like every position. They got, 3 of the best, probably 10 to 15 linemen in the entire league. Quarterback making a ton of money, tight end making a ton of money, running back making a ton of money. Running back now coming off a 2,000-yard season, only the 9th one of those in NFL history, and he hit it in 16 games, so it's legit, very legit. But yeah, really good team coming up this week. Going to be a tough matchup for Green Bay, although I think, there's some avenues. But let's start talking about this one with the injury report first, Dad. It was definitely a little bit dicier early in the week for both teams, with Jalen Hurts kind of making his way still through concussion protocol. Now he has made it out of that, so that's good. And then Jordan Love starting off the week limited with that elbow injury he sustained against the Bears. We still don't know how much it's affecting him, but he was a full participant each of the last 2 days and carries no injury designation into this game, so that's good. In terms
and LaFleur
of,
said he was looking good. A quote from, I think I saw from Wes Hodkiewicz.
Yes, that was in his presser today. He said he was looking good out there, which is always good news. And it's good news that both these teams are going to be at relatively full strength in this game. Obviously, starting on the Packers side, they're not going to have Christian Watson. They're not going to have Jair Alexander. We already know those. But going through the other players that they are not going to have, the only one who is officially listed as out besides those two is Zane Anderson. He is still dealing with that concussion. Obviously, hope he's okay. It's been a little while now, so hopefully he can start transitioning through that next week, maybe. And then beyond that,
to play in the following game.
Sure, why not? Hey, I mean, it is a winnable game, but it is. I would put it at about like Green Bay has like a 40% chance of winning. Is how I would feel about it right now. And maybe I'm a little optimistic, maybe I'm a little pessimistic, but I mean, I think that kind of is demonstrated in the spread being 5.5 now. The spread has moved from 3.5 at the start of this week to 5.5 right now. So just keep an eye on that.
People have been putting their money on the Eagles.
Yeah. Beyond that, though, 5 players questionable for Green Bay: Evan Williams, Quay Walker, TJ Slayton, Brenton Cox, and Andre Dillard. In terms of those that are questionable, Dillard was a full participant on Friday, so he is questionable. The rest of those guys were all limited participants on Friday, so Dillard seems like the most likely to be available in this game. Those other guys, though, for the most part, were limited in each of the practices this week, and so they should hopefully be available. Getting Evan Williams back in this game, especially with Anderson out, would be huge for Green Bay's defense, especially going against, the pass catchers of the Eagles. And then having Slayton in terms of having a run plugger there against a Eagles offense that loves to run the football is massive. And then Brenton Cox, I mean, he's sneaky important to the pass rush right now.
He's actually had like the highest
pressure rate
on the team. On the team?
Yeah, on the team at any spot. Small sample size, obviously, but he has the best pressure rate of any player on the team. Gary is like right behind him. It's pretty close, but he doesn't quite hit like the thresholds you need to hit in terms of like comparing, right. But if you go to small sample size, yeah, exactly. Brenton Cox having a really good year as that rotational pass rusher for Green Bay. And, you could argue, being a rotational pass rusher probably helps your efficiency a little bit because you're a little fresher on those downs. But anyway, we're not here to quibble. Any thoughts on that side of the Packers pass rush, Dad? Or sorry, any thoughts on that side of the Packers injury report, Dad?
I really hope we can get Slayton and Williams. I'm hoping we get all of them.
Yeah, fair enough.
It'd be nice to have Walker and Cooper playing, together.
That's what I'm interested in, because Quay Walker, before he got hurt, was probably played his back-to-back best games, in a row there. And then he gets hurt. I believe it was in that Seattle game, right? He gets hurt in that
it was
game.
The Seattle game. Yeah.
And then misses the Saints, the Vikings, and the game against the Bears. And then really pretty much as that was happening, Edgerrin Cooper was coming back. And so we haven't really seen them together. And it's going to be big for them in this game, if they can get Quay Walker back, that is, just to see how they play off of each other, how they're used. Do they use Quay more as a blitzer? Do they use Cooper more as a blitzer? How do each of them handle the different, complexities of the RPO game that the Eagles, present, which we'll talk about a little bit later. I think having him back is going to be huge for that run defense, because if he can play like he was playing those last 2 games, we got 2 really good linebackers in the middle of the defense, which could be massive for Green Bay.
Yeah, it'd be huge for the defending the run game, watching their tight ends.
et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, that we know they love heavy personnel, so the Packers are probably going to have to play some base in this one and walk a linebacker down. That's something that Walker is really good at. I think, this isn't a shot or a dig or anything, but I think, having Eric Wilson on the field a little less, he's great for what he is in terms of a special teamer, a good depth linebacker, but at times he's able to get targeted in the passing game and taken advantage of a bit in the run game just because he's not fast enough to keep up with some of these, faster paced offenses. And so I think having Walker and Cooper in the game, and then sometimes McDuffie, would be a stronger linebacker core, especially in a game where you're probably going to need it. Moving on to the Eagles side of the injury report, though, they're pretty clean injury report. So they have a couple of guys who've been nursing some bumps and bruises. A.J. Brown didn't practice on Thursday, I believe, with a knee injury, but he was back. Devontae Smith didn't practice today with some back tightness, but they expect him to play. Jalen Hurts just cleared concussion protocol the other day, but he's expected to be a full go. And so at the end of the day, though, only a few players are expected to be out. One is Jack Driscoll, who's one of their offensive linemen. He was placed on IR, but he's more of a depth guy. Trevor Keegan, their guard, he's been sick, unfortunately. He's not going to be playing, but he's also a depth guy. And then Byron Young, one of their defensive tackles with a hamstring injury, is also going to be out. But for the most part, pretty clean injury report on their side, pretty clean injury report on both sides.
Yeah, in some part because players the Packers are missing are going on IR and not on the injury report.
That is true. But that's pretty much it for the injury report. Not a whole lot to touch on there. Good to see these teams mostly going against each other at full strength. It's always more fun when you get, a real battle and nothing where like the teams are compromised in some way or another. Moving on to the game, though, just a couple of quick facts. It's in Philly. Kickoff is 3:30 Green Bay time, 4:30 local time, with a high of 41 shortly before kickoff. So, should be decent weather.
At least last time I checked when I first wrote that.
Yeah. Eagles were favored by 3.5 points coming into the week. Like we already mentioned, that has moved to 5.5 according to ESPN Bet.
It's up to 5.5 now.
Yeah, it's moving. I
think my guess some of this line movement has to do with Hurts.
Yeah, definitely.
Probability of playing going up until now it's sure.
Yeah, but at the same time, though, it opened at 3.5. Hurts cleared concussion protocol and was practicing, and it was and then it moved to 4.5, and then even since Thursday, it's moved to 5.5. So it's
the
money's coming in on the Eagles.
I think the official announcement of him clearing didn't come till this morning.
Fair enough. But it was kind of writing on the wall that he was going to clear it after he practiced both Wednesday and Thursday. So fair enough. But for the Packers, like I mentioned, over under 45.5. That means an implied score of 25-20 for the Eagles. The money's been coming in on Philly, so hey, maybe Vegas can hit the Buffalo Wild Wings button and give the Packers a win. But anyway, let's start off with what's been going on with the Eagles so far this year. They are really good. Tad, take it away.
Yeah, so they're good on both sides of the ball, especially on defense. But they are still on offense. They're 6th in points per drive and 9th in yards per drive on offense, compared to Green Bay at 8th and 11th. So their offensive are pretty similar in terms of efficiency. They on defense, they are 2nd in points per drive and 1st in yards per drive, and compared to Green Bay is 5th in points and 6th in yards. So we take those numbers going into the season, and any season, I think, for the last 10 or so Green Bay seasons. Yeah. By DVOA, total team DVOA, Philadelphia is 5th overall, and Green Bay is 3rd overall when you're adjusting for opponent. However, the Eagles are 1st in defense. Green Bay is 7th. And they are 13th in offense, and Green Bay is 4th. And they are 14th, and special teams, they're 14th, and we're 15th. There's not much difference between them.
No, they're what I'm really interested in, their defense. Like we mentioned, when this season first started, they're bringing in a new defensive coordinator, Vic Fangio. Didn't exactly go well in Miami. How is it going to go this year in Philly? Is time catching up to him? And I think the answer is firmly no. I was looking through all of NFL Pro for what are they bad at? It's they're top 5 in EPA per pass against long passes, top 5 in EPA per pass against short passes, top 5 in EPA per pass against quick passes. They're actually number 1 in the league on passes where you have to hold the ball longer. They're still 4th in EPA per pass. when they're, it's like on and on and on against play action. They are still a top 10 defense, with motion. They're still like one of the 3 or 4 best defenses. And it's really just on and on the list. I was like, is there anywhere you can attack this team? I'm looking at run. Like, can you run inside the tackle on them? Nope. They're number 3 in EPA per carry there. Can you run outside the tackle on them? Nope. They're 8th in EPA per carry there. So it's like on and on and on. There are not a lot of weaknesses in this defense. And it's quite a good team. We already talked about just the skill level of the offensive players and the, investment that they've had there. But on defense, I mean, part of it is they've just hit on several of these draft picks now, whether it's Jalen Carter, Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean's having a very good year, much to the chagrin of a lot of Packers fans who wanted us to draft him. On and on the list, Zach Bond, they bring in on a minimum, go Badgers. But he's having a fantastic year. I believe he made an all-pro team, although I'll have to double check that. Going down the list.
He's like up in the top for all linebackers in defensive grade and coverage grade, and also run defense grade. He's had a fantastic year. And this is a guy who was like an edge rusher for the Saints, like a rotational edge rusher. And they brought him over to the Eagles. And they were like, what if you played some linebacker? Because you played linebacker at Wisconsin. It's like, oh, looks like he's a good linebacker. But just on and on the list, very talented team, not a lot of holes. But Dad, yeah, just a good team, right? Yeah, they seem to be good at every phase of the game. It'll be interesting to see, like, it's going to be their number 1 defense against our number 4 offense. Their number 13 offense against our number 7 defense. Yeah, and our middling special teams will battle it out against each other.
Yeah, exactly. And I will say, though, some of those offensive numbers for them are probably a little bit different because they did have Jalen Hurts out for a couple games with a concussion. So you can give them a little bit of a bump there.
I'm going to raise our hand.
Okay. What do you got? That's fair. We had Malik Willis in for a couple of games.
We had Love out for a couple games.
What are you trying to say about Malik Willis? That's the best backup in the league.
Just raising the Packer hand here.
I'm just saying, I think Malik Willis is better than Kenny Pickett, and I'm not afraid to say it. I'm tired of pretending he is. Malik Willis, best backup QB in the league. You can't tell me anything else. But since we're already saying so many nice things about the Eagles, let's start with that first section, which is, hey, now play nice. Dad, what are some things specifically that you're like, wow, the Eagles are really doing this well this year?
Yeah, so I went to their defensive front. Which is pretty scary.
It's very fierce.
They have the 7th quickest time to pressure, according to NFL Pro. Even though they blitz at the 5th lowest rate in the league, according to NFL Pro. They have 3 of the top 7 interior defensive linemen in the league in PFF pass rush grade. 3 of the top 7 on one team.
Yeah,
in the grade. Against the run, they have the 5th lowest power success against, so short yardage situations, as per FTN Fantasy. They give up the 6th fewest yards before contact and the 7th lowest rush yards over expected on run plays per NFL Pro. Both while using the highest frequency of light boxes and the 2nd lowest frequency of stacked boxes in the league. And they've given up the 2nd fewest rushing touchdowns on the year.
Yeah, their D-line is super frightening, and I am worried about the interior specifically where, Carter is there. And I did want to ask you something, though, because I saw that you highlighted this, and I have a few more things on it later. Do you think there is anything to the fact that Green Bay actually did pretty well against this front in Week 1? So you look at some of the numbers, and in Week 1, Green Bay had the 6th longest allowed time to pressure, so they weren't getting fast pressures on the Packers in Week 1. You look in terms of the run game, yards before contact per attempt, Green Bay was 11th in the league on the week. They were able to, in terms of stuff percentage, Green Bay was getting stuffed a lot. That is one thing. And so that was actually one thing I remembered from that game was like, we were getting stuffed in the backfield a ton in the first half. And then in the second half, we kind of loosened it up. Because I remember at the beginning of that game, I was like, man, talk about, freezing cold takes. In the first half of that game, I was like, man, Josh Jacobs is not playing well right now. This is a tough, because do you remember? Because in that game, they had
that looks like an A.J. Dillon run.
Well, yeah, that, but also they had Josh Jacobs in the first half, and he was just getting stuffed in the backfield over and over again. And then they put Emmanuel Wilson in for like 3 plays, and he got like 25 yards on 3 carries or whatever it was. And I was like, okay, what the hell is happening here? But in the second half of the game, they were able to loosen it up. But so 2 questions.
But Emmanuel Wilson, you did say he was got like the second best
Yeah, rushing success rate in the NFL behind only Bijan Robinson, which is crazy. With if you have 100 carries, I think it was. But so 2 questions for you. Number 1, in terms of the offensive line versus the defensive line, their ability to protect pretty well against that Eagles offensive line in terms of Eagles defensive line rather in terms of pass protection. Do you think that's replicable, or do you think that has more to do with the surface that they were playing on and the D-line not being able to get any kind of traction?
The heck that defense, that surface changed. Everything was so different in that game. Now, I would say that there are a few numbers in sort of the run defense of their front that are not quite as strong. There's it's a mixed bag in some ways of their run defense. Some things they're really good at, some things they're not so good at. Their pass defense, however, looks pretty good.
Yeah, and it was weird because, like you mentioned, it's hard to go back and look at that game and really glean anything. It's like, okay,
I did watch it last night because I wanted to watch it last night.
It's like everyone's falling over, everyone's tripping all over themselves. No one on the D-line can get any drive because their feet are just going out from under them. And so I was thinking about, whether or not you take anything from the fact that the Packers offensive line pass protected pretty well against this defensive line last time. But I think it is hard to really know how much of that was what. Although I'll talk about later. It's really weird because, like you mentioned, their time to pressure is really good. Their time to throw allowed is not bad. Their pressure rate is actually worse than the Packers. I don't really understand what's going on there, but that is just something that I'll talk about a little bit later. But the other question I had was, I'm more concerned about their D-line in the run game and us getting bullied up front. What happens if we can't run? Are we just cooked? Because we have not been very good at passing on early downs or quick game stuff. If we can't run, is it just is that game, set, match?
I think, we'll have to stop just, yucking it downfield. We have to work more areas of the field and not just go for the deep ball if we have to move off of the run game. We have had under LaFleur the whole time he's been in Green Bay, really struggled as an entire offense when we can't run the ball.
Yep. Even with Rodgers,
happened against San Francisco, happened against Tampa Bay, and other matchups when we couldn't run the ball, the whole offense kind of falls apart.
Yeah, it's like if you can't keep,
but we were able to run the ball the first time.
Yeah, and it's you can even look back to just last year at the real turning point of the offense was when Jones came back and they were able to run the ball a little bit, and then the offense really started clicking. But it's going to be tough because at times they were able to ripped off a few big runs in that game. But they also down to down had a tough time getting the running game going. Moving forward though, in terms of what I wanted to talk about for them is their running game is really explosive. They're the most run heavy team in the league. 55.7% of their plays are runs. 67.7% on first downs, which is most in the league, and almost 50% on second downs, which is second most in the league. So early downs, they're running a lot. So not just in third and shorts, and not just tush pushes. They are just running the ball a lot this year, which is part of the reason Saquon was able to pick up so many yards. And they're really good at it. They're third in EPA per carry, although they are only 11th in success rate, which does kind of tie into what I was saying is their down to down running is good. Their explosiveness in the running game is really what separates them from the rest. Saquon leads the league in runs of 50-plus yards. He leads the league in runs of 40-plus yards. He leads the league in runs of 30-plus yards, and he leads the league in runs of 10-plus yards. And, he's second in 20-plus yards. I mean, really just letting everyone down there by not having a clean sweep. But he's hitting
also leading the league in total yards.
Yeah, he is having a lot. And so that's one thing where the Packers have been average at defending, explosive in terms of explosive run rate allowed. They've been pretty good, defending the run overall. They're 8th in EPA per carry allowed, 9th in success rate allowed, but only around league average in explosive run rate allowed. And so that's going to be something where the second level, the safeties are going to have to be really good tackling to not let 15-yard runs turn into 50-yard runs. Because that's, something where, Saquon will be pounding away all game long and the game will be close and then he'll just blow up a 60-yard run, score a touchdown, and then suddenly you're 2 scores down, and everything feels like you're falling behind. You like, now that you're down 2 scores, they're going to run even more. But so that's something where I wanted to highlight of theirs, is that explosive run game from them is, I think, the most dangerous part of their offense, and really what they lean into as an identity on their offense. Obviously, they have great pass catchers, a very dynamic quarterback, a good tight end, an elite offensive line. But really, it's the offensive line, the run blocking, and the run game that are the engine, the heart and soul of their offense.
Yeah, and if he gets out to the second level, that's where we've as you mentioned, struggled. The second are by DVOA adjusted line yards, we're pretty good. And power success, stuff percentage, adjusted line yards. But when you get to the second level yards and the open field yards, then we drop down to 14th and 18th ranked, respectively.
Yeah, and I mean, it's going to be tough because he's not an easy guy to get on the ground. I was actually looking at this. He doesn't have a lot of broken tackles on the season. And the only thing I can assume is no one's touching everybody. Yeah, he's just running away from everyone. He's just
running clean. I was watching, was like, oh man, even after his injuries, and so it seemed to be had lackluster years, he is running away from people this year.
Yep. And every year I am more and more reminded of, the context of where a player is playing is just so important. Whether it's at the quarterback position with what you've seen from Darnold in Minnesota, Baker in Tampa, both those guys were on Carolina doing nothing at all and are now Pro Bowl level quarterbacks leading playoff teams. Whether you see Saquon, when he was with the Giants, it was like, okay, it's kind of boom bust running back. Like he's fun to watch.
And maybe he's already on the downside of his career.
It's like, nope,
gets out of purgatory.
Yep, goes to Philly, has a really good offensive line, and what do you know? He's one of the 9 running backs to ever run for 2,000 yards. And off of that, this is a discussion for another time, but might be a Hall of Famer. Does one, maybe? I don't know. If you run for 2,000 yards this season.
If he had spent his entire career on the Eagles, he'd be probably a surefire Hall of Famer by now.
Yeah, that's definitely possible. But no, so just to circle back to what we're actually talking about, though, I am a little bit.
What was that again?
Yeah, what were we talking about? I am a little bit nervous about that explosive run game. I think it's going to be a massive game for, we've seen in the past few weeks, Bullard take some iffy angles, letting guys get past him. How is Williams going to look if he plays, tackling? He hasn't laid a tackle in quite a long time. Quay as well has not played in a little bit. We know he has at times struggled tackling running backs. I still have the slow-mo of Jonathan Taylor stiff arming him through the ground from week 3 it was. Week 2 earlier in the
push
season.
him into the astral plane, a la, the ancient one.
I think, I don't know how,
stiff arm and knocked his soul out of his body.
Knocked his soul out of his body. I don't know how, but with Quay's long arms, but Taylor was able to stiff arm him so hard that I don't think either of Quay Walker's hands touched him. He got thrown that far off of him. But it's definitely something that I think is a strength of Philly that we're going to have to keep an eye on, which does kind of pivot us over to things that we're maybe nervous about in terms of specific matchups that Green Bay might struggle with. What's the first one for you?
For me, it's the wide receivers. Their top 2 wide receivers are both really good.
Yeah.
And Green Bay gives up the 9th most yards of separation to pass catchers. So let's start off there, a vulnerability. Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown are 6th and 7th in the league in EPA per target, according to NFL Pro, out of 84 qualifying wide receivers. According to PFF, Smith and Brown are 10th and 11th in passer rating when targeted. A.J. Brown is 2nd in the league in yards per route run, behind only Puka Nacua. And Smith is 3rd in the league in catch percentage, while Brown is 29th. But Brown is 21st in contested catch rate, while Smith is down to 74th of that. Now, one thing, so they've had good years. They look good. They've burnt us at times.
Yeah. I mean, I have the numbers for you right here. In that game, they had 18 targets, and on those 18 targets, 12 catches, 203 yards, 1 touchdown between the 2 of them. They really, really torched us in that first game, and that was with Jair Alexander available.
But that was also on a skating rink.
On a skating rink, yes. So that is something to keep in mind.
The one thing I thought was really surprising, so I'm looking through the NFL Pro numbers and looking at average separation of qualifying receivers, so 84 receivers. Smith is 69th out of 84, and Brown is 83rd out of 84 receivers in average yards of separation. Ahead of only Marvin Harrison.
A lot of tight window stuff, huh?
Yeah, a lot of tight windows.
Interesting. The one thing that I wanted to touch on there is the receivers, which I had later, but I guess we can touch on it now because who cares? It's our decision. It's our show. We get a pick.
We can talk about anything we want. Sometimes we do.
So specifically, their receivers versus our corners. I think obviously you would like to go Keyshawn and Valentine on the outside, right? I think we can both agree that those are probably the Packers' two best corners. The one thing I'm a little bit concerned about is they really do love these little bubble RPO screens, where essentially, if the linebacker is pinched in, they'll throw it quick out to the side where they have like guys in a bunch. And so they have two blockers for two defenders, and A.J. Brown, let's say, with the ball in his hands, and he is, then has blockers in front of him, is able to pick up a good chunk of yards. And then if the linebacker starts to cheat outside, they hand it off to Saquon inside where they have a numbers advantage, and he's able to, their line and him are able to get a good, good chunk of yards there as well. And so I'm wondering, Valentine at times has not been the surest tackler. He's also smaller. Do you think that creates a bind for Green Bay where it's like, well, shoot, we're getting killed on these little quick screens. These little quick screens, we're not able to tackle. We're not getting them down to the ground. Our safeties aren't able to get over there fast enough. Do we need to put Stokes in for, more physicality? Because I think for all the things you can say about Stokes in coverage this year, I think for the most part, he's done well at bringing some physicality to the boundary and tackling.
Yeah, though I remember looking at this a couple of weeks ago. I didn't look it up this one. And maybe this is a post game or two that we did. They've actually had some stretches where they've done really well at limiting yards after the catch.
Yeah.
Both of them.
Yes. And as a team, the Packers have done a pretty good job of limiting yards after the catch. Overall on the season, the Packers are third in the league in terms of yards after catch over expectation allowed. The Eagles are first, by the way. So
of course they are.
Yeah, exactly. But so the Packers have been a good tackling team this year, just overall. I do just wonder about maybe. I think it's a trap if they do that, to be honest. The more I think about it, to be like, okay, we need Stokes in for tackling, but it might be something where it just might not become tenable if they just keep getting tackles broken on the outside. But it's just something that kind of popped into my brain there in terms of, what we're nervous about. And I'm a little bit nervous about our corners tackling, specifically Valentine.
Yeah. I mean, they'll just have to have all pass breakups.
Yeah. Easy peasy. But who still hasn't broken up a pass since their rookie year? I'm pretty sure Stokes has still not registered a pass breakup since his rookie year.
I guess everybody's just afraid to throw at him.
Yeah. The thing that I'm nervous is their offensive line versus our defensive line. I think it's safe to say that the defensive line for Green Bay has been the weakness so far this year. In the passing game, we all have talked about it. Green Bay is 20th in pressure rate, 19th in time to pressure, 20th in time to throw. So just kind of all around a below average unit, not like terrible, but a below average pass rush unit. Running game has been better. Third in yards before contact per attempt, 8th in stuff rate, 6th in adjusted line yards per FTN fantasy. But I am still worried about this matchup. In the first game between these two teams, Jalen Hurts had over 3.07 seconds to throw, which was the second longest in week one, and 2.89 seconds to pressure, which was the 8th longest in week one, which is kind of in line with the Eagles overall, having the third longest time to throw and 6th longest time to pressure allowed on the season. So it's not really a statistical anomaly. We've seen the Packers give up a long time to throw before. We've seen the Packers have a long time to pressure before. We've seen the Eagles offensive line do the same in the opposite direction. So it's tough there. And, the Eagles also have the third highest yards before contact per attempt. So I think it's, not just the passing game, it's the running game as well, even though Green Bay has been good at defending the run up front. I'm a little bit nervous about it, though, just because they're so dang big along the offensive line. Whether it's Mailata, massive mountain of a man. Mekhi Becton is like one of the largest tackles we've ever seen, and he's playing guard now. Their center
he's doing well as a guard.
Exactly, he's doing well as a guard. They're just a huge offensive line, and they're just able to really bully people up front. And so I'm a little bit nervous about that strength of theirs, and probably the best offensive line in the league, in my opinion, versus our D line, which has probably been the weakest part of the defense.
But as a defense, Green Bay is third in the league in yards before, third best in the league in yards before contact per attempt.
Allowed. It's true. The run defense, I'm worried about the run game. I'm worried about getting bullied up front. I'm more worried about the passing game and Hurts just being able to Hold the ball,
Right.
hold the ball, hold the ball. Which,
I'm gonna burp the baby. I'm gonna change the diaper, and then I'm gonna look around and then throw it.
hey, I actually have some numbers on that, though, which, might surprise you. A little teaser for later. The other thing, though, that I am also nervous about is their interior D-line versus our offensive line, which you kind of mentioned how strong their interior defensive line is. I think pass protection is going to be huge in this game, specifically along the interior. I'm worried about the Jenkins, Myers, Ryan trio in pass protection. I think they're going to really need to be on their P's and Q's. Whether it's Jalen Carter, who's second in the league in quick pressures amongst interior defensive linemen, I think only Chris Jones is ahead of him, or Milton Williams, who is a name you might not have heard of, but he has a pressure rate of 12.5%, which would rank second in the league amongst D tackles with at least 2
his
pass
name
rush snaps.
popped up when I was looking at their D line. Is like, whoa, I don't know anything about this guy.
Yeah,
except he's near the top of the league.
Yeah, he's quite good. So yeah, he's a really good pass rusher along the interior. His pressure numbers are really good. If you filter down to D tackles with at least 200 pass rush snaps, he's second in the league. And so I think, Myers has struggled as of recently. And so he's the one specifically I am most worried about in terms of having to block Carter and Williams. And then, they still got guys like Jordan Davis, who was a first-round pick, obviously has, been a bit up and down in the league so far, but still a first-round pick. And, a host of other guys who I think are going to cause some problems for Green Bay up front.
Yeah, and I was thinking about, some of those interior offensive linemen as players to watch, though I went in a different direction. I thought about picking Myers as my player to watch. Because if he wins his matchups in the middle of the line, then could be a good day for the Green Bay.
Yeah, and he might be the difference, which is a little bit scary to think about. But it is definitely, to be the best, you got to beat the best. But like we've mentioned a million times before, every time we get to, this is always the darkest part of the podcast, darkest part of the episode. We just talked about what they're good at. We just talked about how they're going to beat up Green Bay. But Green Bay is not helpless in this game, and the Eagles are not a perfect team. They're a very good team, but they're not perfect. They have several exploitable weaknesses. Dad, what is the first thing that you wanted to highlight on their offense in terms of things that or not necessarily just their offense, but in terms of things that Green Bay can maybe pick at, some things that the Eagles don't do well?
Yeah, so their pass protection is not as good as I expected, at least by some metrics. By DVOA, so strength of opponent adjusted, they give up the 5th highest adjusted sack rate in the season. And also, just overall, they have the 2nd highest sack rate in the league, according to NFL Pro. They also give up the 15th highest QB pressure rate, so middle of the pack, not elite, just middling. And it's not just because Hurts. We were talking about this before about does he just let a lot of those pressures convert to sacks?
Because also the time to throw is pretty long. The time to pressure can be a little bit long. But you were saying.
Yeah. But his pressure to sack ratio is 15th, so not terrible. It's middle of the pack. So the question is, can we get pressure? And this is the thing. Without pressure, Hurts has the 4th best EPA per dropback in the league, but when pressured, he drops to 17th.
The issue is I'm trying to find the matchup where they get pressure, right? Because I think fair is fair. I think their tackles just have the advantage over our edge rushers. Like Mailata and Johnson, you're going to have a hard time beating those guys. Unless, Johnson falls over again, which was or doesn't move or whatever it was.
He's like, you're going to blow a whistle, right?
Yeah, he just didn't move, and that was the sack that we got.
Wasn't that encroachment?
But so I think it's going to be tough along the tackles. I think where you're going to have to get after them is along the interior. And so I think it's going to be
big Wyatt and Kenny.
Wyatt, Kenny, Brooks. Going to have to have the
what
games
about
of
a
their
little
lives.
Cooper, Keyshawn blitzing?
We're just so bad at blitzing. We're just so bad at it. It's a problem because, and even in that game, that week 1 game, we tried to send blitzes. We got carved up. We got absolutely shredded. And really, that's been the tale of the whole season. And that's why, going into that Bears game last week, one of the things I was talking about was can we find a way to find some blitzes that work for us? Any kind of schemed up pressure that we can get. And for the most part, it's been a no-go, which is a problem because when you can't rush with 4, which we haven't been able to a lot of the time this year, your only avenue is to either just drop a bunch and hope that, you're able to make them hold the ball and that the pressure's not getting pressure is not that big a deal, or you send blitzes. But the problem is we haven't been able to blitz. So it's tough. And I think maybe some more simulated stuff, just sending 4, but a different 4 might be able to help, but it's tough. But moving on to some other things on their offense that I think is an exploitable weakness that we can look at. while they're really good at passing against man coverage, they've struggled against zone, and these numbers are per the Ringers Philly special, which is a really good listen. They did a two-part preview on this game, which I would really recommend everyone listen to. Jalen Hurts against man coverage this season is third in EPA per play and second in success rate. Against zone coverage, he's 20th in EPA per play and 20th in success rate, which actually plays a little bit into what Green Bay has wanted to do on defense this season. Green Bay is 5th in EPA per dropback when in zone per FTN Fantasy. Only 26th in success rate, unfortunately. But for the most part, they've been pretty good at zone. And, they also don't really like throwing to the middle of the field, which has been where Green Bay has been the weakest. That's not really what Hurts likes to do. He's more of an outside the numbers guy, more of those short, like little screen RPO action types things, like quick angle routes. So there is something there where I think that, Green Bay doesn't have the corners to match up in man against this Eagles defense, but maybe they won't have to. Maybe they'll be able to really strictly play a lot of zone, which has given Hurts trouble at times, and that will be enough, despite the fact that they don't really have, like on paper, the wide receivers versus our corners, massive mismatch. But if we don't need to play that much zone, maybe we can mitigate some of that, discrepancy on paper.
Yeah, if we can get help, cover zones, and not have to man up one-on-one. We'll see whether, how much we blitz or not. And, not have to leave guys out on islands.
Yeah. I mean, that's where you get into trouble because I don't think I would give any of our guys like the advantage at the catch point against like an AJ Brown or a Devontae Smith. I think they would, it's a 60-40 ball, not a 50-50 ball. That's kind of how I feel about that.
And I was also looking at the Eagles' numbers against the blitz and not the blitz. Their EPA per dropback is actually better against the blitz than it is against no blitz.
Yeah, which is interesting because that was a long time, the book on Jalen Hurts is if you blitz him, he's just going to fall apart. And this season specifically, he has been way better at it. It's been a really big change for him and a really big development for him in terms of becoming a next level quarterback in the NFL. Because, it used to be just I think both times actually that Tampa played Philly in the playoffs, but specifically the first one, it's like Todd Bowles was like, "All right, we're sending the house. Good luck." And it just kind of he didn't know what to do with the ball, and he's gotten a lot better at that. They've also gotten a lot better at giving him answers on blitzes, so that's another one. Anything else that you had as an exploitable weakness of the Eagles, though?
So one thing I find surprising, even though like their coverage grade is like really good by PFF as a team, they're looking at NFL Pro. They're only 14th in the league in average separation given up to passing targets, and essentially tied for third worst in the league with eight other teams in average yards of separation to slot targets.
So, yeah, and it's interesting because, Cooper DeJean has been a really good slot defender for them. And I that might be a bit of noise, but, who knows? That might be something where we can get Reed going in this game. I think that's going to be like a very fun matchup is watching Reed versus DeJean over the course of this game. Need a big game for Reed.
Let's hope that we can, have a really big game for Reed against DeJean. And everybody will stop complaining about
not picking DeJean.
But because this is it. Both teams have a lot of differences on defense as their rookies have come along. DeJean is playing really well more, but Evan Williams and Cooper for the Packers
weren't playing in week one, really.
Weren't playing in week one, really.
Yeah, DeJean, I was going to mention, Avonte Maddox was their slot corner in week one when the Packers first played, and Reed had a bazillion yards. But, yeah, they don't really play him anymore. They moved DeJean into that slot role. And, for the Packers, they were playing McKinney and Bullard at safety, at the start of the year, which we've kind of seen that Bullard's best role is probably not as a safety. It's probably more as a slot corner. And so they put Williams there, and Cooper was barely playing either at that point in the year. So very different as these rookies have come along, like you mentioned. And also Quinyon Mitchell, he has gotten better as the season has gone along as well as an outside corner.
Yeah, he's looking really good.
Yeah, he's a good player. Good player. Let's move on, though, to our next section, Dad, which is what do you hope the Packers do in this game? How do you hope the Green Bay approaches this one?
So the first thing I want to mention is play action. Use it. Don't forget about it. With play action, Love has the third best EPA per dropback in the league. But without play action, his EPA per dropback drops to 17th.
Yeah.
The Eagles have the number one defense by EPA per pass against teams when they don't use play action. And that drops to 7th against play action. So not quite as strong.
That's a good one.
The Eagles also give up the 6th most yards of separation against play action, but only the 20th most yards. So they're in like the top third in yards of separation against non-play action, but in the bottom, 20% in yards of separation against play action. So teams are getting more open and getting better plays per play using play action against the Eagles, and it's something that makes a huge difference in how efficient the Packers offense has been.
And I think that's also going to be, big on the offensive line as well, if we're going to run a lot of play action, to be able to hold up for a little bit longer as that play action, goes through. For me, one thing that I hope Green Bay does in this game, besides, playing a little bit more zone, sticking with that, not trying to man up against these receivers where they have, a pretty decent advantage in terms of the skill gap. Make Jalen Hurts hold the ball. This was something that, I kind of was just poking around. It's like, okay, what can we do in this one? Normally, Hurts is at about 0.12 EPA per dropback, which ranks 8th in the league. When he's forced to hold the ball over 2.5 seconds, though, he's at negative 0.02, which is 13th in the league. But you do have to be ready for scrambles. They contained Hurts quite well in week 1 as a runner, but he does scramble on 13.3% of his dropbacks, which is first in the league. And just last week, you kind of struggled in a very similar vein against Caleb Williams, where you let him escape the pocket over and over and over again. And he didn't end up scrambling for that many yards. But if you watch that game, you can be like, okay, they just didn't get contained there. Okay, they didn't get contained again. Okay, he broke the pocket again.
We had trouble against Williams in the first game, too.
Yeah,
escaping from the pocket.
And so that's going to be one where, don't just let him have his first read. Make him hold the ball. Make him process it out. Make him read it out. Muddy up the stuff in the back end in terms of, rotating what zones you're doing. And the Packers do that a lot. But also still be ready for scrambles. That's one thing I hope the Packers do. And then the other was, I actually want the Packers to try and lean into their wide receiver by committee approach. I'd like to see a heavier rotation on the receivers. I'd like to see some more Bo Melton. I'd like to see some more Malik Heath. I think, the defense is not rotating guys. Let's get some fresh legs in there. Maybe that can be a little bit of an advantage for us. I don't know.
This was I think, was this an old Belichick? I'm just going to rotate guys in to run 9 routes over and over and over again.
Get them tired.
And wear out the corner.
Just
rotating in and sprinting downfield, make them run with them until they're gassed by the third quarter.
Why not? Anything else you hope Green Bay does in this one?
So is a style. Don't abandon the run. Yes, so the Eagles are good in a lot of ways, but they're only 10th in yards after contact per attempt against the run, according to NFL Pro. And their overall tackling grade from PFF is only 16th, so middle of the pack. Their stuff percentage is also only 16th, both in NFL Pro and by DVOA. Mm-hmm. So there are some weaknesses to sticking to it. The strongest part of the run defense seems to be downfield. Mm-hmm. So when you get through the line, then in the they're 9th at the second level, 9th best, and 4th best in the open field. So a lot of run defense help, I guess, coming from the linebackers and the secondary.
Yeah, and I just wanted to mention, in that first game, I did mention that Packers got stuffed a lot. They had the Eagles had the second highest stuff rate in the league on that week, but Green Bay still averaged 7.8 yards per carry, which was most in the league on the week, 0.42 EPA per carry, which was most on the league, a success rate of 57.1%, which was 6th most on the league. So while they did get stuffed a lot, they had a lot of carries for negative yards, they still had a lot of successful runs and a lot of big runs in that game. And yeah, probably a good chunk of that had to do with, the playing surface that they were playing on and guys not being able to turn. That is kind of important. But they were able to run the ball last time on the Eagles. And so like you mentioned, just try and stick with that, even though the Eagles are a better run defense now than they were then. And, definitely the context of the field. But yeah, got to stick with it because you can't just abandon your identity.
Yeah, but and for the season, they do give up yards after contact, which is something that actually been kind of the strength of the Packers run game. And Jacobs doing work and getting yards after contact has been one of the best in the league at it.
I can tell you that without even looking at the numbers. Just watching him play, it's like, there's another broken tackle. He broke another one, and he broke another one. and then between the tackles, the Eagles give up the 9th most yards after contact per attempt. Yeah, you can. It's going to be a big Jacobs game.
I think you're going to have to keep, running the rock, even if you don't have success. And that's what happened in the last game. We didn't have success in the beginning.
Yeah,
but then we got success later.
Exactly, but that's going to be also the defense is going to have to hold up.
We're going to have to
keep running the ball.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Let's move on though to our next section, Dad, which is don't take your eye off that guy. What specific Packer are you looking at in this game where it's like they need to have a good game for us to win?
Yeah, so you mentioned it was very tempting to put Myers on here or Jenkins, one of the interior offensive linemen. So
or Ryan.
Like if they like totally shut down the Eagles' interior pass rush, like, yeah, that's going to be good. But I decided to go with Romeo Doubs.
Yeah, it's going to be someone needs to step up. Someone needs to step up along the receiver room with Watson out, and I would say Doubs is probably the most likely.
The Eagles are good at covering almost all types of pass catchers by DVOA from FTN Fantasy, except for wide receiver ones, where they are 24th. And so that's likely Doubs this week.
Yeah, I was going to say, what wide receiver one? That's because I saw that same number. I was like, oh, they're really bad at covering wide receiver ones. It's like, that'd be nice to have a wide receiver
it's just
one.
Next man up into the wide receiver one slot.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a big game for Doubs. I think the guys in the receiver room need to step up with Watson out, because Watson's been their best receiver this year, and without him, someone needs to go step into that role. The player that I wanted to highlight, though, is Edgerrin Cooper. He's just going to be so key in running down the backside of runs, trying to create negative plays in the run game on defense. Also, as the overhang defender in those RPO looks, like we mentioned, he's going to be caught in conflict a lot with like, oh, are they handing it off? Are they throwing that quick screen? Like, that's going to be a lot of him being put in conflict on those things. So he's going to have to be, really locked in. Can't cheat outside too much, but can't pinch inside too much. You're kind of in a bind. It's very difficult. You're going to be the guy getting red on a lot of those. But yeah, so he was the one that I wanted to highlight because it's going to be big in this game. And, they're going to try and get him to take the cheese also on some zone reads stuff as well. So that's something as well. Cause when the Packers see 12 personnel looks, which is 2 tight ends on the field, they like bringing that extra linebacker down. And so if it is Cooper, he would be the guy that's getting red on those zone read, like give or keep things. And so he's going to have to be very locked in there. But yeah, Cooper was the one I really wanted to touch on.
Makes sense. He's actually been the best linebacker in the league in run defense.
I mean, he's getting a ton of tackles for loss.
And he's still top 10 in coverage grade. So these are both PFF numbers that he raised up to the top of the league in run defense and top 10 in coverage.
Yeah, he's been good. But Dad, let's move over to overtime. What do you have that you didn't get a chance to talk about yet?
So I'm going back to wide receiver well here. Improvement of wide receivers in the second half of the year. So over the first 9 weeks of the season, Wicks was worst in the league, dead last out of 104 qualifying wide receivers in drop rate, 27.2%.
Yeah.
6 drops. And Reed was 9th worst in the league, 16.3%. After the bye, Wicks has been actually better than Reed, Doubs, and Watson with a drop percent of only 8%, only 2 drops. In the second half of the year. And is 30, so he's 35th out of 95 qualifying wide receivers in the drop percentage. So it's doing quite well. Reed is still struggling a little bit. He's 8th worst in the league at 13.6%. Still a little better than he was the first half, but still too high. Since the bye, Wicks also has the highest catch percentage of all qualifying Green Bay wide receivers, better than Reed, Doubs, or Watson. I'm trying to match them all together. 29th out of best out of 95 qualifying wide receivers. Heath is slightly higher, but he's only got 8 targets. Yeah, he's got 6 out of 8 for 75%, and I think Wicks' number is 71 point something percent catch rate. Mm-hmm. Now, he's not a 1-for-1 replacement for Watson. His average depth of target is 9 something. It's a lot closer to Reed's and nowhere near Watson's. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is after the bye, even though his drop percentage has only improved marginally, Reed is the 13th, got the 13th highest passer rating when targeted amongst wide receivers in the league, qualifying second half of the year.
Yeah, I mean,
so the pass catchers have been playing better.
They've been playing better. They still need to do even more, in my opinion. I think especially with Watson out, all 3 of those guys, specifically Doubs, Wicks. You got me doing it now. Doubs, Wicks, and Reed specifically.
Careful how you swap those first letters. It might get a little dicey. But I almost did it right now just to describe it. And
then Heath and then Melton, I think, also need to have good games in this one. And Musgrave is essentially a big receiver. Let's put him in there too.
This is another thing I didn't mention that I was thinking about. Would you go with a ton of 2 tight end sets and have with Watson out, you have Musgrave and Kraft out there?
Musgrave does give you some of the speed that you're missing with Watson in terms of field stretching.
Right. Field stretching.
The problem is he's just played so little this season that it's hard to really rely on him in such a big spot,
He may not be ready yet.
I don't know. And it's such a gamble. It's like, okay, we're going to design a big chunk of this around having Musgrave on the field. It's like, okay, he's played 30 snaps total in the last month. It's not a lot. Yeah, it's not much at all. For me, the thing that I would
be a bold move.
Yeah, exactly. And it would be, I would say, borderline desperate of a move.
I guess hopefully we don't get to that point.
Yeah. For me, the one thing I wanted to touch on is I don't really understand the Eagles' pressure numbers. I'm looking at them and I still don't really get them. I already mentioned this already, but as a team, they're 28th in pressure rate, which is worse than the Packers. And we know the Packers' pressure rate hasn't been great, but they are 7th in time to pressure and third in time to throw. So I'm our team's just throwing really fast on them. They're only 19th in number of passes faced in under 2.5 seconds, though. So it's not like they're throwing a lot of quick passes on them. When teams do throw quick on them, they're super duper good. They're first in e-paper dropback allowed against those passes, and Green Bay is not good at quick passes this year. So that's probably not an option. Yeah. So they're really good at stopping it, and we're not good at it. So the quick pressures they do get are going to be effective. But even on throws that take over 2.5 seconds, they're 22nd in pressure rate on those as well. So it's they're just not getting a lot of pressures, but the pressures they do are super effective, I guess is what I'm taking away from that. But I don't know. That was weird to me because you'd think with such a dominant defense that they'd have more dominance as a pass rushing group. So I don't know. Odd to me.
Yeah. And a lot of it, when you look, their overall coverage grades are good. Mm-hmm. Better than their pass rush grades.
Yeah. It's weird. It's weird to me, but that was just something I wanted to touch on. But Dad, let's finish up here. We're already going a little bit long. Bottom line, the Eagles win if blank.
Yeah. Saquon runs wild.
Yeah. What was it? I saw a bunch of people mention this was and I think I'm stealing this from, I can't remember, but just the Eagles have
it's the sincerest form of flattery.
Yeah. The Eagles have a lot.
Whoever you are out there we're stealing from, it's just flattery.
The Eagles
it would be flattery if we could remember to mention your name.
They have a lot more ways of winning the game. I think the Packers need the game to go a certain way. But I have that the Eagles win if they're able to, just win in the trenches and make it difficult for Green Bay to run the ball and have consistent offense and force Green Bay into a pass-heavy script. And hopefully Green Bay can find their passing game. They haven't in several weeks, but if they can, this could be a really good game. But I think that's the way that the Eagles win. Dad, other side, Packers win if blank.
So I have that this time they capitalized on the Eagles' mistakes.
Yeah,
while not making the mistakes themselves. I was rewatching the games holding penalty. We get the ball down in the red zone and then immediately put ourselves behind.
We're going backwards, going straight backwards.
So then the probability of converting on those just went way down really early with some. Hopefully Walker has a better game. He had a bit of a rough game that first game of the season.
It's going to be tough with him first game back, but he's going to have to step up here.
Oh no, I mean Rasheed Walker on offense.
Rasheed Walker. I see what you mean.
Rasheed Walker with a couple holding penalties.
He had 4 pressures allowed, I think, in that game. He did not hold up great against that pass rush. He's going to have to play better. But at the same time, terrible field. So it's I don't even know what to take away from that game. So
yeah, it's why am I watching? I'm why am I watching this game again? It says, well, I don't know. It's a Thursday night. What am I doing? I'm going to sit here and watch a couple of games from the season.
Yeah, and so I think the Packers win if Green Bay can find their passing game. I think they're going to need to. I just think you're going to have to score a decent amount of points, and I don't think you're just going to be able to run the ball all day on them. So Green Bay needs to find their passing game to win this game, and they need to force Hurts into about 2 to 3 mistakes, in my opinion, and capitalize on those. But that's what I got for that. Dad, score prediction. What do you got?
I have the Packers losing to the Eagles 24-20.
I do as well. I have 30-21 Philly. I just think they're a better team and they're in more rhythm. The Packers have not been playing well.
Yeah, the last 2 weeks is kind of
sour.
We're not riding as high going into the playoffs this year as we were last year.
Exactly. And,
even though the year has been better overall,
yeah,
we finished on a higher note last year than this year.
And we also had more wins against quality teams last year, beating the Lions and the Chiefs. This year, your best win's probably the Texans, who might also be a first-round exit.
It could be at Seahawks.
Who didn't make the playoffs.
Didn't make the playoffs.
Exactly. So the Packers, for the Packers to win, they just need to play better than they have played this season. Like, that's the thing. Like, if they show up like they have in a lot of these games where they're shooting themselves in the foot over and over and over again, they start slow, which they've done in all these big games. They just can't afford to do that. And so that's why I picked
a huge difference if the Packers actually score their first possession in this game.
Yes, it would make such a huge
really
difference.
Struggled on those first possessions, it seems. This is, again, like one of those touchy-feely kind of analyses where I didn't actually look up the numbers, but it certainly has truthiness to it.
It does. It feels true. But yeah, so if the Packers do what they have done in these big games, which is start slow and make lots of mistakes, they're not going to win. If they turn it around and, are galvanized by, a couple of really poor weeks here and are able to find the passing game that has eluded them for several weeks now, they can win this game, but they need to essentially play different than they have almost the entire year in these big matchups. But any final thoughts on this game, Dad, or should we wrap things up?
No big thoughts, just
okay.
I hope to jump out to hope we jump out to a lead this time and not we're
I hope
scrambling to come back in the fourth quarter again.
Yeah, enough of that. That's not good for my heart. Let's just win by 50. Why not? But anyway, thank you, everyone.
We're going to be averaging 30 yards a carry.
Why not? Why not? But anyway, thank you, everyone, so much for listening, checking this out. Once again, follow us on Twitter and Blue Sky at FatherSonPacker for updates on when new episodes are out. And whether or not the Packers win or lose, we will still be here. We do episodes over the offseason as well. So check we'll be doing a post game after this game, so check that out next week. And, if the Packers win, we'll be previewing whoever they play next. If the Packers lose, we'll start talking about postmortems and talking about the draft. We love talking about the draft here. We'll be doing draft talk for pretty much the entire offseason, doing an episode a week over the offseason. We cut it down from 2 to 1. But so keep checking those out. They'll keep coming. Yep. Keep, follow us on Twitter and Blue Sky at FatherSonPacker. We'll tweet out when we have those. Subscribe. It'll give you notifications too. Spotify, Apple, YouTube. Leave a review. Leave a comment. Really help us out. Dad, any final thoughts, or should we wrap this up?
Yeah, just say you're not getting rid of us that easy.
Nope, no, you're not. But hopefully, we're back just giving a post game after a Packers win.
We want to continue on this
2 a week. We want to keep doing 2 a week.
This in-season schedule.
Yes. So if they win, we'll be here. If they lose, we'll be here, no matter what. But anyway, thank you again so much for listening. And until next time, go Pack, go.
Go Pack, go.